It began in the grand chamber of the Galactic Council, a hall so vast that its ceiling vanished into mist, supported by pillars carved from the cores of dead stars, a place where thousands of alien species gathered to maintain what they called galactic harmony. For centuries, that chamber had echoed with promises of peace, but on that day, the illusion shattered. At the center of it all stood General Aurora Vance, the most decorated officer in the Terran fleet, known throughout the galaxy as the Iron Woman of Earth. Her silver uniform bore the black crest of the Terran Command, and the quiet strength in her posture made even the most arrogant species pause. Humanity had sent her as their voice, their shield, and their warning, for she had come not for negotiation, but for truth. The Council had promised to investigate the massacre at Seraphis, a Terran colony wiped from existence by a rogue Dominion fleet, but weeks had passed, and the Council's answer was silence. Aurora's patience had ended the moment she entered that hall. The alien delegates whispered among themselves as she approached the center podium, her boots echoing sharply on the obsidian floor. "We asked for answers, not apologies," Aurora said, her voice carrying effortlessly through the chamber's acoustic field. Her tone was calm, but there was steel beneath it. "You promised to hold the Dominion accountable for the deaths of 60,000 Terran civilians. Instead, you offer excuses." The Council Chancellor, a towering being with translucent blue skin that shimmered under the light, shifted uncomfortably. "General Vance," he began, his tone condescending, "Earth must understand that the Council cannot interfere in every border dispute. The Dominion regrets what happened, regrets." Aurora interrupted, her eyes narrowing. "You call the annihilation of a peaceful colony a mistake." Murmurs rippled across the hall, some alien faces showing discomfort, others amusement. "Humanity has always been emotional," another delegate muttered. And then it happened. The Chancellor rose from his seat, his crystalline form casting refracted light across the chamber. "You will not raise your voice in this hall, Terran," he said, his tone sharp as glass. Aurora stood unmoving, her gaze fixed on him. "Then perhaps you should lower yours," she replied quietly. The hall fell silent, every eye on them. In the next instant, the Chancellor stepped forward, his hand swinging with shocking speed, and struck her across the face. The sound echoed through the chamber like thunder breaking a storm. Gasps erupted from every corner. The guards at the edges of the hall froze, unsure whether to intervene. Aurora's head turned slightly from the force, a thin line of blood running down her cheek, but she did not fall. She simply stood there, eyes cold, unflinching. For a heartbeat, no one moved. And then, one by one, the alien delegates turned away as if nothing had happened. The Council Chancellor adjusted his robe, his tone dismissive. "This session is concluded," he declared, "an unfortunate misunderstanding." Guards approached, placing hands on Aurora's arms to escort her out. She didn't resist. But before she left the chamber, she turned her head slightly, her voice quiet but carrying a deadly calm. "You've made your choice," she said. "Now we'll make ours." Outside the chamber, the human delegation was silent. Ambassador Keen, pale and trembling, tried to speak. "General, contact Fleet Command," Aurora interrupted. "Tell them everything. Show them the recording." Within hours, the footage spread across human space like wildfire. Every screen, every broadcast replayed that single moment, the strike heard around the stars. The galaxy saw it as an act of discipline. Humanity saw it as a declaration of war. On Earth, billions gathered in the plazas of major cities, watching the silent footage of their general being humiliated before the Council. No commentator dared to speak. No government official appeared on screen. Even the military networks stayed quiet. It was the kind of silence that carried more power than words. In the underground command center of the Terran Defense Complex, the highest-ranking officers gathered. Among them was Admiral Rowan Hale, mentor to Aurora Vance, a man known for his ruthless precision and calm intellect. He watched the footage in silence, his fingers tapping lightly against the table. When it ended, he looked at the others. "They struck a Terran general," he said softly. "They struck Earth itself." No one disagreed. "Activate Contingency Protocol 13, he ordered. Seal the borders. Recall every ship. No messages. No warnings. The following days were unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Earth withdrew from every council agreement. The embassies were evacuated. Terran fleets vanished from the trade routes. Civilian transports were grounded. The council demanded communication, but every signal sent toward Earth was met with silence. The other races mocked the humans, calling them cowards, too ashamed to face the consequences of their pride. Yet behind the quiet, something immense was moving. Deep beneath Mars's red surface, the shipyards came alive, machinery thundering in the dust. On Titan, weapons factories worked without rest. On Neptune's dark side, a massive structure began to take shape, a ring so vast it could eclipse moons. The Aegis Halo, the weapon the galaxy didn't yet know existed. General Aurora Vance was taken to a Terran medical station orbiting Luna. The strike had fractured her cheekbone, but the injury was nothing compared to the fury burning inside her. As doctors repaired the damage, she watched news feeds on the hospital screen, seeing her image played across every network, every corner of human space. Children wore badges with her insignia. Soldiers stood in silence before holograms of the council hall. Humanity wasn't speaking, but it was remembering. When Admiral Hale visited her bedside, she stood before he could speak. "They hit me in front of the galaxy," she said. "Now we'll make sure the galaxy never forgets." Hale met her gaze, and for a long moment, no words passed between them. Then he nodded once. "Operation Vengeance," he said. The name spread quietly through the ranks, carried not by command but by belief. It wasn't an order, it was a vow. In the outer colonies, miners volunteered to work double shifts to fund the war effort. Engineers built ships faster than any record in history. Scientists opened restricted archives, unlocking forbidden technology from the old wars. Humanity had always been clever, always adaptable, but now they were something more. They were united. Every factory light burned through the night, every officer trained without rest. Meanwhile, the council met again in panic. "We must demand compliance," shouted one alien leader. "If humanity refuses communication, we suspend their rights as a council species." Another hissed, "Do that, and they'll retaliate. You saw what they're capable of." The Chancellor, the very one who struck Aurora, waved his crystalline hand dismissively. "Humans are sentimental creatures. They'll protest, threaten, and then forgive. They always do." But the Council's arrogance blinded them. They didn't see the black fleets leaving Earth's orbit one by one, engines quiet, destinations unknown. They didn't see the shadows moving through deep space. On the 7th day after the incident, a Dominion listening post on the edge of the Orion Rift detected something massive approaching. The operator leaned forward, confused. "That can't be right," he muttered. "No heat signature, no transponder, no radiation trail." Then the signal vanished. Minutes later, the sun of the Dominion outpost began to dim. The crew panicked, systems failing as the star flickered like a dying flame. And then it went dark. The entire system vanished from all sensors, as if swallowed by night. When news reached the council, they dismissed it as a natural phenomenon. "Stars collapse all the time," one delegate said. But Admiral Hale, watching from his command ship Vigilant Resolve, simply whispered, "Phase 1 complete." The galaxy didn't know yet, but war had already begun. Operation Vengeance wasn't just a retaliation, it was an erasure. Humanity wasn't going to fight the Dominion in open battle. They were going to make sure their name was never spoken again. And at the heart of it all, Aurora Vance stood on the observation deck of her flagship Lion's Roar, her reflection in the glass mirroring the distant stars. "They thought they could shame us," she said quietly. "Let's show them what comes after shame." Behind her, the officers saluted in silence. Across the void, 1,000 ships aligned their courses. Engines ignited, glowing white-hot like the fury of a dying sun. And as the fleet began its long journey toward vengeance, the galaxies beyond whispered in unease. The Council had created peace through fear, but now that fear had found a new home. For the first time in centuries, alien empires began to understand what humans had always known. That peace is not the absence of war, but the space between it, and when that space is broken, humanity doesn't forgive. Humanity answers. The galaxy watched in eerie silence as humanity vanished behind the black veil of its borders. No transmissions, no diplomats, no explanation, only silence, and that silence terrified everyone because the last time Earth went dark, entire empires had fallen, and now it was happening again. But this time the stakes were far greater. This time they had struck a Terran general, and the humans were no longer the fractured species of old. They were one will, one anger, one unstoppable storm waiting to move. Admiral Rowan Hale stood on the command deck of the Terran flagship Vigilant Resolve, the same ship that had ended 3 wars in a single day, and watched as the last of the civilian transports entered the Sol system. He gave the order himself: seal the gates, cut the relays, and one by one, the wormholes connecting humanity to the galaxy blinked out of existence, communication stations powered down, and the stars beyond Earth grew cold, silent, unreachable. The alien empires tried to send envoys, but they were turned away by automated defenses, the gates closing with the same finality as a door on a tomb. It was as if Earth had died, yet in the shadows of that silence, something immense was waking. Factories that had long been idle roared to life, drones poured from underground foundries, shipyards on Mars expanded tenfold, and engineers worked without rest under orders marked classified. Operation Vengeance. No one outside Terran Command knew what was being built, but whispers spread through the fleet like fire. Strange cargo being moved between moons, power readings higher than anything on record. Artificial stars igniting inside containment fields, the hum of something far beyond. Weapons, something that could end light itself. Hale didn't need to explain it to his officers. They all knew humanity's methods: quiet, relentless, absolute. "We don't scream before we strike," he said during the First War Council. "We strike so no one else can scream." And as he spoke, his voice carried through every relay of the Terran command net, reaching soldiers, engineers, and pilots alike, uniting them under one truth. They were not fighting for pride. They were fighting for memory. Meanwhile, on Earth, beneath the steel skies of the Terran Defense Complex, General Aurora Vance recovered in the silence of her medical wing. The scar from the alien strike still visible across her cheek, a reminder not of pain but of purpose. Her eyes remained sharp, her mind steady, as she listened to the whispers of the soldiers who passed her door. They spoke of vengeance, of justice, of ships vanishing into the void, and though she was still weak, she smiled faintly because she knew her people. They didn't need speeches or flags. All they needed was a wound deep enough to remember. She rose from the medical bed, ignoring the pain, and walked toward the window overlooking the city below. Earth's skies were filled with silent vessels moving like shadows, their hulls black as obsidian, their engines burning blue fire. The sight made her heart beat steady, not with rage but with focus. She whispered softly to herself, "Let them think we are silent." And in that moment, her reflection merged with the darkness of the glass, as though even the light refused to separate her from the storm that was coming. In the following weeks, the galaxy mocked them. Alien commentators laughed on interstellar broadcasts, calling humanity a wounded predator pretending to sleep. The Dominion fleet celebrated its so-called victory at Seraphis, raising monuments to their triumph over the Terran arrogance. And yet even as they cheered, Dominion patrol ships began disappearing along the frontier, one by one, gone without signal or trace. Scouts sent to investigate found only static, empty systems, and drifting wrecks half-melted by forces they couldn't measure. The Council sent teams to analyze the phenomenon, but no one returned, and still Earth said nothing. The silence grew unbearable, like the tightening of a noose. Entire sectors began to whisper that the humans were building something that could devour suns, that they had discovered the weapon of gods. A few even claimed to have seen it. A vast structure near Neptune, blacker than night, pulsing with faint light, so large it looked like it was eating the stars around it. They called it the Hand of Earth, though its true name, Aegis Halo, remained buried deep in Terran Command archives. Inside the War Command, Admiral Hale stood beside the holographic map of the galaxy, thousands of red dots marking systems that had sided with the Dominion. His officers waited for him to speak, but he only stared for a long time, the silence pressing on the room until it became unbearable. And when he finally spoke, his words were quiet, yet they carried enough weight to shake the walls. "They think this is about a strike," he said. But it's about balance. They took one woman and humiliated a nation, so we will take their arrogance and humiliate an empire. The officers said nothing, they only nodded, because they could already feel the tide turning. Every Terran ship received its orders that night, encrypted through quantum relays that even the Council's best spies couldn't intercept. The message was only 6 words long, for Seraphis. For General Aurora Vance. It became a vow, an anthem whispered through every corridor of every ship, repeated before every launch, before every battle simulation. Even children on Earth began carving it into walls, because those 6 words meant something greater than war. They meant retribution wrapped in justice, vengeance tempered by purpose. On the far edges of human space, a Dominion listening post detected something strange again. A gravity wave unlike anything recorded before. It rippled through space, bending light and matter. The crew stared at their screens in disbelief, trying to contact command. But their signals dissolved into static, and as the light outside their window began to distort, they realized what was happening too late. The stars stretched, twisted, and then blinked out completely. Their final broadcast carried across one system before fading. The dark is coming, and it's human. The Council received the recording hours later and dismissed it as propaganda. They refused to believe that humanity had developed a weapon capable of collapsing stars. Humans are emotional, not advanced, one alien leader scoffed. They rely on brute force, not brilliance. But deep inside, even they felt the chill crawling through their spines, because the silence coming from the Terran sectors no longer felt like retreat. It felt like preparation. Admiral Hale stood at the viewport of the Vigilant Resolve as the ship drifted past the orbit of Pluto, its hull reflecting the faint glow of the weapon array below. She doesn't need to speak, he said softly to his aide, because the universe already heard her cry, referring to Aurora's humiliation, a wound so public that it had become legend overnight, a story burned into every human's mind, a strike that had become the spark of vengeance. Every empire fears the roar, Hale continued. But it's the quiet before the roar that destroys them. His aide didn't answer, he didn't need to, because as the Admiral watched the dark halo pulse, faint arcs of light spreading through space like veins of lightning, he knew that humanity had already crossed the line. There was no going back, no forgiveness left to give. The Council could call them monsters, the Dominion could call them terrorists, but it didn't matter, because the war had already begun in silence, and by the time the first system vanished, the galaxy would finally understand that humanity never forgets and never forgives, especially when you strike one of their own. The silence that had once blanketed human space began to crack, not through words or threats, but through actions too precise and too powerful to ignore. For weeks the galaxy had mocked the Terrans, calling them cowards hiding behind their walls, yet one by one, systems belonging to the Dominion began to flicker out of existence. The first world was Arcanus Prime, a colony world known for its shipyards that supplied half the Dominion's war fleet. It vanished in a single night. Its sun dimmed. Its orbits gone cold. Ships that passed through afterward reported only shadows and fragments of debris glowing faintly in the dark. The Council dismissed it as a starquake. But when the second and third systems vanished, even the most arrogant species began to whisper humanity's name in fear. No one claimed responsibility. No Terran fleet was seen. No transmissions were intercepted. Only the emptiness left behind, and across the galaxy. The phrase "the Black Suns" began to spread, a quiet rumor among smugglers and traders who swore that Earth had built something capable of extinguishing light itself. Something alive, something watching. In the command chamber of the Vigilant Resolve, Admiral Rowan Hale stood beside the holographic projection of the Dominion border, his expression calm, his eyes reflecting the glowing red sectors one by one turning black. "They still call us human," he said softly. "But what we're becoming, they won't have a word for it." Beside him, his second-in-command, Captain Arya Lorne, hesitated before asking, "Sir, what happens when they surrender?" Hale turned his gaze toward her, his voice even. "Then they'll understand the mercy they never gave." Every officer on the bridge understood what that meant. Operation Vengeance wasn't just retaliation. It was justice designed to make the galaxy remember what happens when you touch Earth's heart. The orders had already been executed across the Terran fleets. Phase 2 was underway, the Aegis Halo now fully operational, its energy field stretching across the void near Neptune, feeding off the captured power of dying stars, unseen by the Council, unknown even to most Terran citizens. It was the invisible hand of judgment. Far away, At the Dominion capital of Varaxis, their High Chancellor sat in council, surrounded by advisors who shouted in panic, 3 sectors gone in 7 days. We must strike back. One of them roared. Another, trembling, replied, strike what? They're ghosts. No heat, no light, no trace. How do you fight something that doesn't exist? The Chancellor slammed his clawed fist on the table, the impact sending shards of crystal scattering. Then we find them, he barked. No race hides from us. But even as he spoke, the room darkened, the lights flickered, and an eerie transmission filled the air. A voice speaking across every frequency, calm, human, and cold. You struck our general, it said. You slaughtered our colonies, and now you beg for mercy? There is no mercy in the dark. Then, silence. The council chambers across the galaxy received the same message seconds later. Panic spread like wildfire, diplomats demanded answers, scientists scrambled to trace the origin. But the message had no source, no signal path. It came from everywhere and nowhere at once, the voice of vengeance echoing through the stars. Back on Earth, General Aurora Vance stood once again, her strength returned, her body scarred but her will unbroken. She watched the footage of the Dominion's chaos on the holoscreen. Cities burning under their own fear, fleets scattering, soldiers fleeing, all because of a single slap that had awakened the wrath of an entire species. They thought we would beg, she said quietly. They forgot who we are. Her reflection in the window showed the steel and sadness in her eyes, the kind that only those who have seen too much can bear. Admiral Hale appeared behind her, his face lined with exhaustion. It's working, he said. They're unraveling faster than we expected. Aurora didn't smile. She only turned to him and said, we don't destroy for pride, Rowan. We destroy so they'll never try again. Hale nodded slowly, understanding that her words weren't rage. They were duty. As Operation Vengeance advanced, Terran fleets began moving deeper into enemy sectors, black ships emerging from the void like shadows given form. Their hulls absorbed all light. Their engines left no trace. They struck at communication relays, orbital defenses, and research worlds, not with bombs, but with pulses of energy that left nothing but silence, no sound, no heat, no survivors. Alien pilots who glimpsed the ships and lived called them the Reapers, whispering that they were not human anymore, that Earth had become something far darker, something divine. The Council tried to unite the remaining empires, urging cooperation. But their trust had already broken, each species now afraid that if they spoke too loudly, humanity would hear and erase them next. And that fear was exactly what Hale wanted. Let them tremble. He said during one of the command briefings, let them look at every shadow and wonder if it's us. And his officers obeyed, carrying out his orders with a precision that bordered on perfection. Meanwhile, on the ruins of a destroyed Dominion world, a Terran strike team discovered something horrifying. An alien data vault filled with recordings of the Seraphis attack, not a rogue action as the Council claimed, but a planned extermination, documents signed by multiple alien empires, approving the strike to test humanity's reaction time. To measure how much loss Earth could bear before bending, Aurora watched the footage in silence, her hands tightening behind her back. And when it ended, she said only 3 words, erase their sons. Hale didn't argue, he didn't question, he simply nodded, because what they had just uncovered wasn't war. It was betrayal of the highest order, and for that, there would be no forgiveness, not in this galaxy, not in any other. The Dominion tried to rally, calling upon old alliances, promising the Council that they could crush the Terrans if given support. But no help came. The other species had already begun withdrawing their fleets, afraid that helping the Dominion would paint targets on their own stars. And so, the Dominion stood alone, and in the darkness, the Terran fleet descended, the Aegis halo activated once more, its massive energy field rippling across the cosmos, bending light, consuming power, and in seconds, the Dominion's capital sun began to flicker, its surface boiling, collapsing inward as if the universe itself had decided to reclaim it. The last broadcast from the Dominion's Chancellor reached the Council moments before the end, his voice filled with terror. It's not war, it's judgment. And then the signal cut out forever. In the aftermath, the galaxy fell into uneasy quiet, entire sectors now empty, the void haunted by the memory of what humanity had done. The Council called for a truce, but their messages went unanswered, Every attempt at communication was met by the same automated reply from the Terran frontier. For simple words that sent chills through every diplomat who read them, for General Aurora Vance. And as those words spread, even the most distant civilizations understood the truth, that the humans hadn't disappeared into silence, they had become it. The silence that ends everything, the silence that follows vengeance. The galaxy was burning with panic, and still humanity said nothing, no broadcasts, no demands, no declarations, just quiet precision that made the Council realize silence was the most terrifying sound in the universe. Entire sectors once glittering with life were now dark. Voids where no signal returned, and every time the Council convened to discuss surrender, another Dominion world vanished before their eyes. By now even the most arrogant races whispered that the Terrans had become something beyond mortal, something that punished not with rage but with balance. Yet still the Council refused to admit guilt. They called humanity unstable, emotional, primitive. But every word spoken against Earth became a death sentence for another system. And one by one those who mocked fell silent forever. At the center of it all stood Admiral Rowan Hale aboard the Vigilant Resolve, staring into a sea of holographic stars where Dominion territory used to be. Each blinking light marked a sun now gone. Every erasure another message. He turned to his crew, voice calm. They thought vengeance meant chaos, he said softly. They didn't understand, it means order. On the far side of the galaxy, in the orbit of the shattered Dominion world of Threxus, General Aurora Vance stood on the deck of her flagship Lion's Roar, her hands clasped behind her back, the scar on her cheek still visible beneath the cold lights of the command room. Around her stood the senior officers of the Terran fleet. Veterans hardened by war, none of them spoke, they didn't need to. Aurora's presence alone carried weight heavier than gravity. She looked out at the broken remains of enemy ships drifting in silence. "Do you know what I hate most about this?" she asked quietly, and when no one answered, she continued. "They called it justice when they struck me. They called it law when they slaughtered our colonies, and now they call it tragedy when we strike back." She turned toward them, her voice low but sharp as a blade. "So tell me, who writes their laws now?" No one dared to answer, because they all knew the truth. The laws of the galaxy now belonged to Earth. The Council met in emergency session for the third time in 1 week. The hall that had once been a symbol of unity now filled with fear. Leaders shouting over one another, blaming, accusing, their glowing forms reflecting off the darkened floor as the great holo display flickered with reports of vanishing systems. "They're not fighting," one shouted. "They're erasing," another screamed. "We must retaliate before they finish us all." But the Chancellor, the same crystalline being who had once struck Aurora, stood at the center of it, trembling though his voice tried to remain steady. "Retaliate with what?" he said. "Half our fleets are gone, our supply worlds destroyed, our allies fleeing." He looked around the chamber, his expression cracking. "We struck one woman, and now we're losing everything," and for the first time, he felt the weight of what he had done. But it was too late for remorse, because humanity wasn't coming for talks, they were coming for reckoning. Across human space, Operation Vengeance was now fully active. Thousands of Terran ships coordinated with impossible precision, guided by artificial intelligences merged with human instincts, creations of Aurora's strategic mind. They didn't act like fleets. They acted like one organism, moving as if each ship knew exactly what the others were thinking, striking from angles that no alien command could predict. For every attack the Dominion launched, 5 of their own systems went dark. Their dreadnoughts melted mid-warp, their suns flickered and collapsed, and still Earth's transmissions were silent. The last Dominion admiral alive sent a desperate message across the Council network, his voice trembling. "You think you can reason with them? You can't. They're not like us anymore. They look human, they sound human, but what they've built, it's not war, it's extinction wearing a human face." His transmission cut out halfway through as his fleet disappeared in a flash of white light that left nothing behind. On Earth, Hale and Aurora met inside the Terran War Council chamber, a room buried deep beneath the surface where the walls glowed faintly with energy from the Aegis Halo's core. Hale looked older now, the burden of what they'd unleashed visible in his eyes. "You've become their symbol," he said quietly, "their reason, their weapon." Aurora didn't smile, her gaze fixed on the holographic projection of the galaxy shrinking with every erased star. "They needed a symbol," she replied, "not a leader." Hale studied her. "You're not angry?" She shook her head. "Anger burns fast, Rowan. This is something colder, Sharper, it doesn't fade. Hale looked at her then, and he saw it. The same fire that had once made humanity rise against impossible odds. The same defiance that had carried their species through the darkness of the void. And he realized she wasn't fighting for vengeance anymore. She was fighting to ensure the universe would never dare strike humanity again. As Operation Vengeance reached its final phase, the Aegis halo began to move, not through engines or thrusters, but through gravity itself, dragging its massive structure across space like a shifting eclipse, its surface alive with black lightning, its pulse matching the rhythm of collapsing stars. Entire fleets vanished beneath its reach, and when alien scientists tried to study it from afar, their probes returned images of a single human symbol carved into its surface, the insignia of General Aurora Vance. Beneath it, 3 words glowed faintly in Terran script: "We remember Seraphis." And for the first time in recorded history, the council hall fell completely silent, not out of debate, not out of fear of reprisal, but out of the realization that they had awakened something ancient in humanity, something primal, something that had waited generations to rise. The Dominion made one final stand at the border of the Veil Nebula, their last bastion of resistance surrounded by hundreds of ships, each armed with their strongest weapons. Commanders shouted orders, trying to rally their soldiers. "They bleed like we do," their leader roared. "They can die like we do." But as the first Terran fleet emerged from hyperspace, every screen flickered and every sensor failed, and in that darkness, thousands of small lights appeared, Terran ships forming a wall of fire, engines glowing like the eyes of a predator. And then came the voice of Aurora Vance herself, transmitted across all frequencies, calm, steady, and final. "We asked for answers," she said, her voice echoing across every ship. "You gave us ashes, we asked for peace. You gave us pain, now you ask for mercy. But mercy belongs to those who remember." Then the transmission cut, and the stars went black. When the light returned, the Veil Nebula was gone, replaced by a hollow sphere of silence that stretched for light years. Nothing within it, no ships, no sound, no light, just a perfect void. A grave carved into the fabric of space itself, and though the Council tried to deny it, every surviving sensor confirmed the truth. The Terrans had ended an entire civilization without a single trace of life remaining, and yet they didn't claim it as victory. No celebration, no speeches, no glory, because, for humanity, vengeance was never about triumph. It was about memory, a scar written into the cosmos to remind the galaxy what it means to strike against Earth. Back in the Council chamber, the Chancellor who had started it all stood alone before the empty seats of fallen empires, his reflection trembling in the polished floor, and when the news of the Veil Nebula reached him, he sank to his knees, whispering the same words over and over. "We shouldn't have touched her, we shouldn't have touched her." But no one remained to hear him, no one left to answer, because the age of the Council had ended, and the age of humanity had begun. A silent empire, built not on conquest, but on warning, a truth written in the black of space. Strike one Terran, and you strike the stars themselves. The ruins of the Dominion's last world still glowed faintly in the void, their ashes drifting like dust across the dead light of broken suns. Yet even after such destruction, humanity did not celebrate. No parades, no speeches, no broadcasts, only silence and purpose, because the mission wasn't over. Operation Vengeance was not about victory, it was about balance. About ending a cycle the galaxy had begun the moment it humiliated General Aurora Vance before the Council. In those halls where peace was supposed to live, arrogance had been born instead, and now that arrogance had been erased, Admiral Rowan Hale stood in the command center of the Vigilant Resolve surrounded by officers who moved with mechanical precision. Their faces pale from weeks of sleepless duty. "Report," he said quietly, and the holograms around him flickered to life, showing sector after sector going dark. 73 Dominion systems neutralized, sir, Aria Lorne answered. "No survivors, no counterattack, no movement in any Council-aligned fleet." Hale nodded, his eyes fixed on the holographic galaxy. So much emptiness where stars used to shine. He whispered to himself, "They wanted silence, they'll have it." On the bridge of the Lion's Roar, Aurora stood watching the same map projected before her, her reflection merging with the sea of stars that now looked thinner than it once had. Her voice broke the still air. "It's done," she said softly, "the Dominion is gone." But there was no pride in her tone, only exhaustion, as if vengeance had burned through her bones and left her hollow. The officers nearby didn't dare speak. Because they saw in her eyes that this war wasn't just about punishment. It was about something deeper, something personal. The moment she had been struck had not been about her alone. It had been about the collective humiliation of humanity, and the galaxy's belief that Earth would always bend. Now that belief was gone forever. Hale appeared beside her through the hololink, his voice quiet. The Council sent a request for negotiation. He said, they want a ceasefire, reparations, and forgiveness. Aurora turned her head slowly toward the image. Forgiveness, she repeated, her tone almost amused. Tell them forgiveness is for equals. And they lost that right when they called us beneath them. Hale didn't argue. He only gave a single nod and cut the transmission. Because deep down, he agreed, there could be no peace built on the ashes of deceit. Meanwhile, across alien worlds still untouched, panic spread faster than light. Refugees flooded border systems, begging for protection, praying that the humans would stop. But there was no response, only the quiet hum of empty frequencies. The silence that followed human judgment. Traders whispered stories in dim-lit cantinas, tales of black ships moving like phantoms, of worlds whose suns flickered once before vanishing forever. They don't fight anymore, one alien said, his voice trembling. They just erase, and every time someone asked who commanded them, who had the power to silence entire galaxies, the answer was always the same. A name spoken like a curse, like a prayer, Aurora Vance, the woman who had turned humiliation into legend, the general who now stood as the embodiment of humanity's wrath and restraint. Those who had once mocked her now taught their children never to speak her name, for fear that it might summon the storm again. In the dark reaches beyond the known systems, the Aegis halo hovered in orbit around a dead star, its colossal frame glowing with residual energy. Its design no longer merely a weapon but a monument to vengeance itself. Engineers and scientists worked around it in silence, studying the energy patterns, learning from it, understanding how far humanity had come, and how far it had gone. Admiral Hale visited the site alone, walking through the observation deck as the machine pulsed like a heartbeat. Beautiful, isn't it? Said one of the lead scientists. It can bend gravity, distort space, rewrite the laws of physics, and yet, it obeys only one command, it remembers. Hale stared at the glowing core, his voice quiet. Remembering is what makes us dangerous, the scientist nodded, and merciful. But Hale didn't respond, because mercy was not something he had seen in years, not from the galaxy, not from humanity, only purpose, and purpose never sleeps. The Council grew desperate, sending emissaries from every surviving empire to Earth, fleets bearing white flags, their ships disarmed, their leaders trembling as they entered orbit around the blue planet. They expected to be met by fleets of war, but instead they were greeted by silence, no escorts, no weapons aimed, only the vast void of space filled with the calm presence of Terran satellites watching like silent eyes. The emissaries landed on the surface, escorted through empty halls into a grand chamber deep beneath Earth's surface. There they found Aurora Vance seated alone at a table of polished steel, her uniform plain, her expression unreadable. You came to beg, she said softly, and none of them denied it. One alien delegate fell to his knees. We did not understand your ways, he said, his voice cracking. We never thought you would go this far. Aurora leaned forward, her eyes cold but steady. You didn't think we'd fight for our own? You didn't think we'd remember Seraphis? Or the slap heard across the stars? The alien lowered his gaze, unable to meet her stare. Please, he whispered, no more worlds. Aurora stood slowly, her boots echoing against the floor. No more, she repeated. Then listen carefully, because this is the only mercy Earth will ever give. You will rebuild what you destroyed. You will teach your children what you did, and you will remember the silence we gave you, because if you forget, the stars will go dark again. The emissaries left Earth in silence, their ships drifting back into space, and word of their meeting spread across the surviving empires like gospel. Every world now spoke of the new law. The law of the Terrans. Unwritten yet absolute, never strike them, never provoke them, never mistake their kindness for weakness, and from that day on, every alien fleet that passed near human space dimmed its engines in respect. A gesture that became universal tradition. The quiet salute of fear and honor. Aurora returned to her ship afterward, the war finally ending, but her reflection in the viewport looked older, colder, her once fiery eyes now dimmed with the weight of what she had done. Hale joined her on the bridge, his voice gentle. You gave them a chance to live. Aurora shook her head. I gave them memory, she said, life they must earn themselves. The two stood together as Earth rose before them, bright and blue, untouched by the fires of war, yet haunted by the silence that kept it safe. In the months that followed, the Terran fleet withdrew from alien space. The Aegis Halo was locked away, sealed under magnetic stasis in the shadow of Neptune. Humanity returned to rebuilding. But the galaxy would never be the same again. New worlds rose under the banner of fear and respect for the species that had rewritten the balance of power, and the story of General Aurora Vance spread like myth, sung in whispers, painted on walls, carved into stone. The woman they struck, the woman who made the stars bow. She never called herself a hero, never claimed victory, because for her, victory meant nothing, survival meant everything, and when she finally stood once more at the edge of the Sol system, watching the calm horizon of her home, she whispered to herself, "Let them call it vengeance," her voice barely audible over the hum of the engines. "I'll call it peace, the kind they can finally understand." And as her ship drifted into the light of dawn, the galaxy looked toward Earth not as an equal, but as a force eternal and untouchable, the silent guardian whose fury had carved peace out of the bones of stars. Time moved slowly after the fires went out. But the silence that followed Operation Vengeance was not peace. It was waiting, the kind of stillness that comes before the next storm, because even though the Dominion was gone and the Council shattered, fragments of their fleets still drifted. In the void, survivors who whispered of revenge, scavengers who searched the ruins for Terran technology, and hidden warlords who refused to believe that the humans could truly end them all. Yet deep in the heart of the Sol system, humanity was not rebuilding an empire. They were rebuilding purpose. The Terran fleet stood vigilant, their ships anchored like sentinels around Earth, their hulls scarred but unbroken, and in the center of it all, aboard the flagship Lion's Roar, General Aurora Vance sat alone in the observation deck, staring at the endless ocean of stars beyond the glass, her reflection faint beneath the light of distant suns. She had fought, she had endured, and she had won. But the victory had left her hollow. Every face she saw in her memory was one that had been lost to get here. Every erased system another scar carved into her conscience. She whispered quietly, almost to herself, "We've shown them fear, but have we shown them the cost?" Down on Earth, Admiral Rowan Hale stood in the command tower overlooking the rebuilding of New Geneva. The city once burned by war now blooming with life again. Its streets filled with laughter, its skies clear, but behind every smile he saw exhaustion. Humans were not celebrating. They were remembering. Statues of the fallen lined the plazas, holograms replayed fragments of Seraphis, and at night the people looked toward the heavens not with pride, but with caution, because they knew what humanity was capable of now. They knew that their vengeance had rewritten history, but also that it had left them alone. Even the nearest alien colonies refused to approach Terran borders, their ships keeping a respectful distance. The galaxy's great powers had become ghosts, and in their place, silence reigned. Hale turned to his aide and said quietly, "This is what peace looks like when it's earned through fire. It doesn't sing, it whispers." But beyond the borders of human space, shadows began to stir again, remnants of the Dominion regrouped in hidden systems, led by surviving admirals who had escaped the Aegis Halo's final purge. They met in secret, broken fleets gathering in the ruins of dark stars. "They think it's over," one hissed through the static of a failing communicator. "But Earth cannot erase everything. Not while we breathe," and across the void, desperate leaders clung to that hope, the idea that the humans could still bleed, that the fire could be extinguished. They began to forge weapons stolen from the wreckage of their fallen allies, fragments of Terran technology reverse-engineered by trembling hands. They called it the Eclipse Engine, a device meant to extinguish Earth's light as retribution. But they did not understand the power they were playing with, for that stolen technology carried the same essence as the Aegis Halo itself. And when they activated it, something woke that was never meant to wake. In the Sol command chamber, the alarms went silent first, then flared red across every display. Unidentified gravitational surge detected. The technician shouted, "Origin, outer Perseus Rift." Hale's eyes narrowed. "That's outside our mapped sectors," he muttered. "How strong?" "Off the charts," the officer replied. "It's bending the rift itself." For a heartbeat, Hale felt the air grow colder, as if space itself had shuddered. He looked toward the window where the Earth hung serene and blue, unaware that the void beyond had begun to tremble again. And then, without warning, every comm beacon in the outer frontier went dark, replaced by a single signal, repeating on every frequency. A voice half distorted, half human. "You took our stars," it said, "now we take your sun." When the message reached the lion's roar, Aurora was already awake. She had felt it before the alert came. A deep vibration in her bones. The instinct of a soldier who had seen too many wars to mistake peace for permanence. She stood before the viewport as the signal played again. Her expression calm but her heartbeat steady as thunder. "They're coming," she said, and within minutes, the ship's decks were alive with movement, alarms pulsing through the halls, soldiers racing to their stations. The command crew waiting for her orders. "We can't fire blind," one officer said. "We don't know who they are." Aurora turned slowly, her voice sharp and certain. "Then we remind them who we are." And with that, the Terran fleet mobilized, engines roaring, thousands of ships rising from the orbital docks in perfect formation. Black hulls reflecting the sunlight like a single blade drawn from its sheath. Across the galaxy, the fragments of the Dominion emerged from hiding, thousands of ships forming a ragged fleet under a single burning banner. Their engines screaming, their weapons armed with unstable power. They thought they could strike Earth the way they had struck Seraphis long ago. But they had forgotten that humanity did not fight wars anymore. It ended them. Hale's voice thundered through the comms, "Activate Aegis Protocol." And deep within Neptune's shadow, the Aegis halo came alive. Once more, its rings spinning, its energy building like the heartbeat of a god awakening. The Dominion fleet advanced, shouting their rage across the void, "For our fallen!" They cried, but what answered was not fury. It was silence. Aurora's face appeared on every screen across the galaxy, her tone calm, her eyes cold. "We gave you peace," she said. "You mistook it for mercy. Now you will learn what mercy costs." And with one gesture, she gave the order. The Aegis halo fired not like a weapon, but like a sunrise, a wave of light sweeping through space, bending around the Earth, expanding outward faster than thought, touching every ship, every star in its path. But instead of destruction, there was transformation. The energy fields twisted around the attacking fleet, their weapons failing, their engines imploding, and then, as the light dimmed, there was nothing left, no fire, no debris, no sound, just stillness. The light faded, and only the Earth remained, untouched, calm, silent. The Dominion was gone forever, erased not by anger, but by inevitability. When the glow faded, Hale sat in his command chair, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's over," he said. But Aurora didn't answer. She was staring into the stars, her face unreadable. "No," she finally said. "It's never over, not while memory exists." She turned away, her hand resting on the glass. "They will rebuild one day, someone always does, but they'll tell their children what happened here, and that will be enough to hold them back." Hale nodded slowly, understanding that vengeance had turned into deterrence, and deterrence into legacy. The galaxy would never again raise a hand against Earth, because Earth had shown them what happened when it was struck. In the years that followed, humanity expanded again, not through conquest but through quiet guardianship, their fleets patrolling not as tyrants but as watchers, ensuring that no empire rose to repeat the mistakes of the past. The Aegis halo was deactivated, drifting once more in the dark like a sleeping god, its surface marked with the names of every fallen Terran colony, and carved beneath them in bold, unyielding letters were the words, "For General Aurora Vance, she who was struck, she who remembered." And across the stars, even centuries later, when alien children asked their elders why the sky seemed quieter near human space, their elders only whispered the same warning. Because that is where the vengeance of Earth sleeps, and even the stars dare not wake it. The galaxy never truly recovered from what humanity had done, not in memory, not in courage, not in the quiet that followed, because silence itself had become Earth's greatest weapon, and every world, every species, every surviving empire lived beneath it, knowing that the moment they forgot what happened, the moment they dared to test the patience of the Terran kind, the stars could go dark again. Centuries passed. Yet the story of General Aurora Vance endured like scripture carved into the bones of time. They called her the Iron General, the woman who turned a single strike into a storm that burned the heavens. And though she had vanished from public sight long ago, her legend walked through every corridor of every Terran ship, her name spoken not with worship, but with reverence, for she was the reminder of what it meant to be human. She was the wound that never healed but kept humanity sharp. On Earth, life returned to peace, cities glowed beneath golden skies, Children played in streets named after fallen worlds, and for the first time in history, no soldier had to carry a rifle, because no one dared to make them. Yet peace built on fear is fragile, and even as Earth thrived, somewhere beyond the spiral arms of the Milky Way, new civilizations began to rise from the ashes of those humanity had erased, small, broken, but curious, whispering myths about the blue planet that had once silenced gods. Some believed it was gone, others said it still watched from the dark, waiting for arrogance to awaken it again, and they were right, because the Terran fleet never disbanded, it only hid, its ships orbiting beyond the edge of mapped space, unseen but always there, their sensors tuned to the heartbeat of the galaxy, listening for danger, for deceit, for any echo of the arrogance that had once dared to strike their kind. Admiral Rowan Hale lived long enough to see the world he had fought for rebuilt, his hair gray, his eyes clouded by time, yet his voice still held the weight that had once silenced entire councils. He spent his final years near the shores of New Geneva, walking alone beside the sea, where the sound of waves reminded him of engines and the cries of the lost. When reporters asked him what he felt after all these years, he gave the same answer every time. "We didn't win," he said softly. "We remembered." And when they asked if he ever regretted what humanity had done, he would look toward the horizon where the sky met the water and whisper, "Regret is for those who forget why they fought." When he died, his ashes were scattered into orbit, and for 3 nights straight, the sky above Earth burned brighter than it ever had, as though the stars themselves bowed their heads in respect. Aurora Vance, however, was never seen again after the final awakening of the Aegis Halo. Some said she had gone into deep stasis, sleeping aboard her flagship that now drifted near the edge of the Oort cloud. Others believed she had become something more, something beyond human, that the Halo had fused her consciousness into its core, making her eternal, watching, waiting, guarding. But the truth was simpler. In a quiet valley on a world unknown to any chart, Aurora lived among peace for the first time, her hair silver, her eyes still sharp, tending to a small garden under twin suns. She never spoke of war, never mentioned her title, never told the people who she was. But sometimes at night, when she looked up at the sky, she could still see the faint shimmer of the halo's rings turning in the far distance, and she would whisper softly, "Still watching, I see," as if speaking to an old friend who never stopped protecting her. Far beyond her quiet world, the galaxy had changed. The Council no longer existed. In its place stood the Coalition of Worlds, an alliance born not from power but from fear of repeating the past. Its charter written with one law above all: never strike first, never provoke the Terrans. Ambassadors from hundreds of species visited Earth once a decade, offering tribute, peace, technology, and promises of loyalty. But humanity no longer sought control. They no longer wanted to rule, they only wanted the silence to hold, to make sure no child ever saw again what Aurora had seen that day in the council chamber. The slap that had broken peace forever. And in every school across the Coalition, in every language, one phrase was taught, simple and unyielding: never strike the sons and daughters of Earth. The Aegis Halo, now dormant, drifted through the void like a slumbering god, its surface etched with the names of fallen worlds and lost children, its power sleeping, but not gone, and deep within its core, a faint heartbeat still pulsed, the residual echo of Aurora's command centuries ago. "We remember." The words glowed faintly in the dark, pulsing once every few years, as if the machine itself was breathing, waiting for the moment it might be needed again. Terran patrols visited it once every century, scanning, maintaining, ensuring it remained silent. Yet every soldier who stood before its colossal rings felt the same chill, the same awareness that this was not just a weapon. It was a promise, carved into the stars themselves, that if the galaxy ever forgot, the Halo would remember for them. Generations passed, and humanity's expansion reached beyond even the oldest star maps. Their colonies became beacons of light scattered across endless dark, peaceful, prosperous, and yet disciplined, because history had taught them the price of arrogance, and they carried that lesson in their blood. One night, aboard a distant colony orbiting a crimson sun, a child asked her teacher, "Why do we never go to war?" The teacher smiled faintly, showing her a hologram of a woman standing proud in a dark uniform, her eyes bright and unyielding. "Because she did," the teacher replied, "and she made sure we'd never have to again." The little girl stared at the hologram for a long time before whispering, "What was her name?" The teacher's eyes softened. Her name was Aurora Vance. and when the galaxy struck her, she showed them what humanity's light truly meant. That night, the colony's communication array picked up a faint anomaly in deep space, a ripple of gravity so soft it barely registered. Yet it came from the direction of the Aegis halo. The technicians dismissed it as a phantom signal, just old machinery shifting in the dark. But if someone had been there, close enough to see, they would have noticed a single line of light etching itself across the halo's dormant surface. Faint but growing brighter, the ancient message awakening for the first time in centuries, for Seraphis, for humanity, for Aurora, and somewhere, far beyond human reach, the stars flickered once, as if remembering, before settling into stillness again. And so the story ended not with fire, but with memory, the kind that outlasts time, the kind that binds every star together. Humanity did not conquer the galaxy. They became its conscience, the silent hand that kept the balance, the watchful guardians who ensured peace not through fear, but through remembrance. And though Aurora Vance's name had faded from daily speech, every Terran ship still carried her crest. Every fleet still saluted her image before launch, and every world still slept safely under the light of suns that no longer feared extinction, because the galaxy had learned, and would never forget, that when you strike humanity's heart, you awaken its soul, and that soul can burn brighter than every star combined.